A week from tomorrow marks the 25th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Tonight, we begin on this broadcast a series of reports about that event and its continued meaning to America. The sights and sounds of those 4 days in Dallas have echoed through the decades. We are still trying to understand the many ways they changed our country, events painful to remember but impossible to forget.
Now turning on to Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the trademark.
I probably will never be the same after that day.
I can see Mrs. Kennedy's pink suit. We understand Governor and Mrs. Connolly are in the car with President and Mrs. Kennedy. We can't see who has been hit, if anybody's been hit, but apparently something is wrong here. Something is terribly wrong.
Everybody just fell apart, and when you mention it, it is really amazing how fresh it is and how hurtful.
President Kennedy has been given a blood transfusion at Parkland Hospital here in Dallas in an effort to save his life after he and Governor John Connolly of Texas were shot.
Everybody started crying. The news came, I get chills from even talking about the news came over.
Just a moment, we have a bulletin coming in. We now switch you directly to Parkland Hospital and KBOX News Director Bill Hampton.
The President of the United States is dead.
To Americans of a certain age, the images from John F. Kennedy's life and from his death a quarter century ago are absolutely indelible, never to be erased. Imprints of the American dream and the American nightmare.
In the brief years Jack was here with us, he touched our hearts with fire.
Time, as it will, has brought a certain consolation. Life goes on. The former First Lady,
and will always be
Caroline Kennedy, married now, John Kennedy Jr., grown too. A new generation, keepers of the flame.
The night the word passed that John Kennedy had been killed, the people came to the Peace Corps volunteers' homes.
Time also has brought millions of young Americans not yet born when John Kennedy died, eager to learn, though, of that long-ago idealistic age. The Peace Corps, the new frontier.
President John F. Kennedy was killed by highly qualified and professional assassins hired by the Mafia.
But time has also brought enduring skepticism about the official story of Kennedy's death. This group meets in Dallas monthly, convinced there was a conspiracy to kill the president. And across the country, most Americans now agree.
I don't believe that Oswald was the sole assassin.
I think he was a patsy, set up.
I think it would frighten us if we knew 10% of what really goes on.
It was not always so. When the commission headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren first released its report in 1964, its reconstruction of the shooting and its 26 volumes of testimony were hailed as exhaustive, believable. But critics immediately began pointing to seeming contradictions and gaps in the record.
I called the Chief Justice at one time and I said, "Chief, you know, I'm upset." I said, "These people are calling us crooks and liars." "Oh," he says, "forget about it. History will prove we were right."
But on this 25th anniversary of the gunfire in Dealey Plaza, Dallas, a nationwide CBS News poll finds that only 13% of all Americans now believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone firing from this window. Fully 2/3 of the public now think there was a conspiracy. Almost as many think there was a cover-up to obscure the truth. The figures dismay Warren Commission investigators.
The evidence is compelling that there was no conspiracy, and had there been a conspiracy, I think in our free and open society, we would have learned about it before the 25th anniversary.
Some contend that no matter what the facts, the idea that one man, this man, firing one gun, this gun, and hurting a nation so is just too cruel to accept.
Because that means that any of us could be struck down arbitrarily. So I think temperamentally we want to know that it's a conspiracy, and I think that's what keeps all of that alive, even though we haven't been able to prove it until this time.
But with the anniversary, we think it is appropriate to examine again the evidence and the questions about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. We have done that recently in Dallas, in Washington and New Orleans, in Mexico City, in Moscow and Minsk in the USSR. As you will see in subsequent reports, we have talked to people the Warren Commission did not interview, like John Kennedy's mistress, Judith Exner,
I would not be surprised if there wasn't a Cuban involvement, and I would not be surprised if there was a mob involvement. None of those things would surprise me. What would surprise me is if they absolutely prove that it was Oswald by himself. That would shock me.
We have talked to people who knew Oswald well, like Ruth Payne.
I am concerned that people are being misled. I do believe he fired the shot. I believe he acted alone.
And we have re-examined the films of the shooting with two people who barely survived it, former Texas Governor and Mrs. John Connally.
We were so excited that they were in Texas, and we were so pleased that Dallas was reacting the way it was. I couldn't resist saying, Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you.
I felt a sharp blow, like somebody walked up behind me and hit me with a closed fist. And I saw immediately that I was covered with blood. And I said, my God, they're going to kill us all.
Tomorrow night, correspondent Rita Braver on what we know and don't know about the assassination and organized crime. For now, that's the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather, see you tomorrow. Good night. Since the assassination of President John Kennedy, theories of conspiracy have come and gone. Some stay. One that's endured theorizes that the mob somehow may have been behind the shooting. Rita Braver reports tonight on that theory and the evidence as we continue our series, 25 Years.
3 shots were fired at President Kennedy has been assassinated.
Oswald has been shot.
Was the assassination of John F. Kennedy a Mafia hit?
I really don't know what the situation is about. Nobody.
The Warren Commission found that Lee Harvey Oswald, an unstable, oddball character, acted alone and was then killed by Jack Ruby, another unstable, oddball character who acted alone. But studying evidence unearthed later, the House Assassinations Committee and other scholars have found new relationships linking both Ruby and Oswald to organized crime.
What we did that the Warren Commission didn't do is explore possible associations between Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby. Not directly, but through secondary people.
The mob links begin here in New Orleans, where Lee Harvey Oswald spent much of his youth living with his uncle, Dutz Moret, who operated right here on this French Quarter block as a bookmaker in the gambling network run by the boss of the New Orleans mob, Carlos Marcello. Marcello was a key target of Attorney General Robert Kennedy's anti-mafia crusade. Kennedy even had him temporarily deported to Guatemala.
They just grabbed the guy. He couldn't call his wife. As he said, I couldn't even get a toothbrush or a little cash, a change of clothes. It was very well known in southern Louisiana that Carlos Marcello had sworn to eventually get the Kennedys.
And during a meeting at Marcello's fishing camp outside New Orleans, the mobster was quite specific, according to a former private investigator who says he got to know Marcello while working undercover.
And he said to me, what you do is you cut off the head of the dog and then the tail dies. And I had instant recognition on that sentence.
What did you think it meant?
I think it meant you killed the president and Bobby is taken care of.
Even back when he was a Senate investigator, Robert Kennedy had given mobsters other reasons to hate the family.
You tell us anything about any of your operations, or just giggle every time I ask you a question?
Decline to answer because I honestly believe my answer might tend to incriminate me.
I thought only little girls giggled, Mr. Giancana.
Chicago mobster Sam Giancana. The same Sam Giancana who was close to John Kennedy's mistress, Judith Exner. She now claims she set up a meeting between Giancana and the president-to-be at Kennedy's request.
And I asked him why, and he said he thought he could help him with the election. And I proceeded to do so.
She says later Giancana joked about delivering Chicago votes for Kennedy.
He used to make sarcastic remarks to me that your boyfriend wouldn't be president if it wasn't for me.
So according to mob theorists, the Mafia felt double-crossed by Robert Kennedy's vendetta. And the theory goes Mafia chief Marcello recruited the nephew of one of his bookies as the assassin, Lee Oswald. using as a go-between David Ferry, a shady New Orleans type who died mysteriously in 1967. As for Jack Ruby's ties to the mob, they allegedly went back to his boyhood in Chicago and continued in Dallas.
The bar he ran was part of a circuit with B-girls, prostitutes, and what have you. The place he got his girls from immediately was the show bar in Louisiana, connected to Carlos Marcello.
If mobsters did recruit Jack Ruby, they came to the right man. He was a well-known cop buff with many friends on the Dallas police force. And he had no trouble gaining access to this police department garage and moving in close enough to fire the shot that killed Lee Harvey Oswald.
The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
But despite those cryptic remarks after his trial, Ruby never claimed he was a hired gun. And others who've studied the evidence totally reject the mob theory.
Mafia hitmen are closed-mouthed, unemotional killers who have a long track record of effectively carrying out murder contracts for the mob. Oswald and Ruby are the most unlikely Mafia hitmen that anyone could possibly imagine.
The one man who might know all, Carlos Marcello, is in federal prison on racketeering charges and refused to be interviewed. And even those who support the mob theory admit that there is not enough proof to support a prosecutable case. The U.S. Justice Department recently announced that it will not look further into the assassination unless some new evidence is available. So we may never know whether a plot to kill President Kennedy was hatched in this city. Rita Braver, CBS News, New Orleans.
David Martin on the assassination, the CIA, and Cuba.
Thanks, Mark. 25 years after John F. Kennedy was killed in Dallas, the mystery of his assassination and the fascination with that mystery both remain strong. In a CBS News New York Times poll taken a month ago, 2/3 of Americans did not believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, and only 13% thought he did. And more than 60% thought there was an official cover-up to keep the public from learning the truth. This morning in our series, Remembering John F. Kennedy, we examined some of the theories of what happened in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. Just weeks after Kennedy's death, President Johnson established the Warren Commission to investigate the assassination. Senator Arlen Specter was an attorney with the commission and remains today confident of its findings.
The evidence is overwhelming that Oswald was the assassin, that there is no credible evidence that there was a conspiracy.
The Warren Commission concluded that Oswald acted alone. They said all the shots were fired from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. But as the motorcade passed by, witnesses from the grassy knoll said they heard shots in that area. Some even said they saw a man carrying what they thought was a gun. Important medical evidence and intelligence reports also cast doubt on the commission's conclusion. In the 1970s, Congress, under pressure from Warren Commission critics, held hearings on the assassination and concluded that Oswald did not act alone. The Justice Department examined the evidence and stated recently there was no reason to reopen the case. A new series of books and documentaries all claim to have finally uncovered conclusive evidence the assassination was connected to the Mafia, Castro, and the CIA. And joining us live from San Francisco is Paul Hoke, who has spent years researching the Kennedy assassination. And here in New York, Robert Blakey, who was counsel to the House Assassinations Committee. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Paul, give me first a short, quick list on some of the holes in the Warren Commission.
Well, you know, it takes more time than we have to go through the technical details. I think in terms of why the Warren Commission wasn't successful in convincing people, I think part of the answer is that they were handed a solution at the very beginning. The Dallas police had already arrested Oswald. The FBI was convinced that Oswald was the lone assassin, and the Warren Commission faced incredible hostility from J. Edgar Hoover himself. Oswald himself had connections which I think guaranteed that there would be speculation, a great deal of speculation, with the intent of causing the government to take some action, say, against Cuba or against the Soviet Union. All of those things put pressure on the Warren Commission. The holes in the Warren Commission, I think, ranged from the physical evidence to unresolved questions about motivation of Oswald, the motivation of Jack Ruby.
Okay, let's talk about Oswald for a second. Just paint a portrait of this guy. He was seen all over Dallas in the months before the assassination. He met with left-wing groups, he met with right-wing groups. What's wrong with the notion, Robert, that this guy may have just been some nut who climbed up in the book depository and assassinated the president?
Nothing. In fact, that's one of the lines that the evidence leads you to go in. But what you have to look at is what happened in the plaza. The Warren Commission said there was no credible evidence of more than one shooter in the plaza, yet there were 20 witnesses who say they heard shots from the grassy knoll. There were 4 witnesses who say they heard shots both from the grassy knoll and the depository. The Warren Commission had to reject that kind of testimony. In addition, we uncovered acoustical evidence that fit like hand in glove with the other physical evidence that corroborated that testimony.
This is acoustical evidence that's from the policeman who had his microphone open
That's
on
right.
a two-way radio.
Now, there are doubts have been cast on it. Nonetheless, I remain confident that its story is basically sound, that there were 4 shots, 3 from the depository and 1 from the grassy knoll. If you accept that there are 2 shooters in the plaza, then your simple statement, Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, simply does not hold water in light of the evidence as a whole.
Robert, isn't it your sense, don't you believe that the CIA was involved in this and that it was because the Kennedy administration had talked about trying to assassinate Castro that that all of this came to be? Or give me your pocket theory on what happened.
I think you said...
Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking to Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I think the background, as background, the CIA plots to kill Castro, plots with the Mafia, is certainly an important story of what happened to the investigation and to all the investigations since the Warren Commission. The thing about Oswald is that I think his career, his life, bumped up against intelligence matters from his service in the Marines through his stay in the Soviet Union, and even back in the United States when he was, to all appearances, a left-winger carrying out pro-Castro leaflet distributions and so on. It's a long jump from that to any kind of CIA involvement in the assassination. But I think what's very clear is that the knowledge of those plots and the sensitivity of Oswald's background led a lot of people to cover up a lot of things for different reasons, most of which, I'm sure, had nothing to do with the assassination. They can't all have been related to the assassination.
And your sense is that it was tied to the Mafia?
Well, what I conclude is that that's the one scenario that holds more evidence together than anything else. But the degree of confidence that I have in that is not beyond a reasonable doubt. Indeed, if there were additional evidence today, and I don't believe there will be, that I would be led to change my mind. John Quitney had a report on television about 2 weeks ago that explored this in some, I thought, responsible way, and laid out the evidence that points in the direction of mob involvement.
It seems there is little doubt that we are going to be discussing this for years and years to come. Paul, Robert, thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
It is 17 minutes past the hour. Kathleen?
Coming up next, Sarah Moriarty. And
the film Manchurian Candidate was made in 1962, and it was about a man programmed to shoot a politician, and 1 year later, John F. Kennedy was killed. Well, the film was then pulled from circulation, but this spring, it's been re-released.
Now then, Raymond, take this scarf and strangle Ed Mavoli to death.
The Manchurian Candidate begins with a group of Korean War veterans who were captured by the communists, brainwashed, then sent home to carry out Soviet and Chinese orders. Lawrence Harvey portrays a platoon leader and a Medal of Honor winner who's been programmed by the communists to kill an American politician. Harvey receives his final instructions from his stateside controller, then stalks his target from a convention hall window. A year after the film's release, Lee Harvey Oswald killed President Kennedy from the window of the Texas School Book Depository. There is no evidence that Lee Harvey Oswald ever saw the Manchurian Candidate, but its producers pulled the film anyway, fearing the public would become angry at the similarities. Even today, producer Frank Sinatra prefers to remain vague about why that film was shelved.
I really don't remember, but there was some reason for it. There had to be. But I'm glad that they brought it out again, because I think it's a marvelous movie.
It's not a fun movie. It's a very thought-provoking movie, but it's a wonderful suspense thriller, one of the best ever made. Of course, it has the very nasty aspect of the shooting of the presidential nominee in it, which Mr. Sinatra felt was a dangerous piece of film to be around, particularly after the Kennedy assassination.
The picture was released in November of '62, and the assassination occurred in November of '63. Because I happened to be in Paris during the assassination when it occurred, and within 2 days in Paris there were pictures in the French press of Larry Harvey and Harvey Oswald. The two Harvey things connected too as well. I don't know, but
oh, that's weird.
Yeah. I thought of that just a second.
I was going to say, I didn't think of that before.
Yeah, but no, there was that, and oh yeah, oh God, and indeed I called Frank, and we decided to pull the picture within a couple of days after that.
Ironically, John Kennedy enjoyed the movie that his friend Sinatra produced.
He saw the film.
And what did he think of the film?
He loved it. We sent it to him to the White House to see it.
What the producers wanted to do by making the film was to criticize McCarthyism and the way the media could make demagogues look patriotic.
I am United States Senator John Jfk Assassination, and I have here a list of the names of 207 persons who are known by the Secretary of Defense as being members of the Communist Party.
That in itself was controversial, and long before the Kennedy assassination, there were demonstrations against the film.
We were picketed on the Champs-Élysées in Paris by the Communist Party at the same time that we were picketed in Orange County by the American Legion.
They couldn't conceive that this really could happen, that it was almost a science fiction type thing, but their paranoia allowed it. And yet today we can see from the history in the interim where it can and has happened.
Political assassinations, media manipulation, and brainwashing, themes that the movie laid out 26 years ago, have become events in our lives, making the film just as meaningful to audiences today.
The thing that kicked it off really was the fact that it was a smash hit at the New York Film Festival. And this got the excitement going again, and it all appears to be ending very happily because it's spread like mulch over the country. It started very small, you know, and now they're at 60, 70 theaters and going strong.
It's now 23 minutes past the hour. We'll be back.